You get to the end of a great conversation. Your prospect is nodding. They get what you do and they like you. And then they say this: "We really like you, but we went with someone less expensive." And you think, they just chose somebody worse. They'll regret it. Maybe, but in the meantime, you lost the work. If this has happened to you more than twice, I want to offer you a completely different explanation for why, because it's almost certainly not about your price. By the end of this video, you're going to understand what's actually happening when prospects go with cheaper alternatives, and what specific changes in your brand make price almost irrelevant to the right client. Here's what I know after years of working with founders. When a prospect goes with a cheaper option, price is almost never the real reason. Price is the reason they give you. It's the reason they might give themselves. But the real reason is almost always perceived risk. They couldn't tell clearly enough why you were worth the difference. Not because difference doesn't exist, it does, but because your brand didn't make it unmistakable. In quality engineering, we have a term, specification gap. It's the distance between what a product promises and what it actually delivers. Price objections in a service business are almost always caused by a kind of spec gap. It's the distance between the quality of your work and the clarity of your brand. So if it's not about price, what is it? When a prospect can't tell why you're worth more than the alternative, it usually comes down to one of three positioning gaps. Gap one is that there's no clear differentiation. They understand what you do, but not why you're different from everyone else who does the same thing. You blend into a category instead of standing out from it. And when you blend in, price is the only thing they have to go on, and that becomes the tiebreaker. The second gap is that there's no specific transformation language. You described the service, the deliverables, the process, and the features. You didn't describe what changes in their world because of your work. Features feel like costs. Transformation feels like an investment. Third gap is that there's no proof of the spec. They can't see clearly enough what the outcome looks like. Not really talking about testimonials necessarily, although that can be a part of it, but a clear, specific picture of what done looks like and what it produces for them. Without that picture, any price is a gamble to them. So here's how I diagnose this with clients. I ask a question. If your ideal client read your website right now, not your whole website, just the first page, could they tell within about 30 seconds exactly who you help, what changes for them, and why you're different from the alternative? Most of the time, the answer is no. Not because the founder didn't know the answers to those questions, but because they haven't made them specific enough to put on a page clearly. And if a prospect can't get those answers from your brand, they're filling in the blanks themselves, and they'll fill them in pretty conservatively, which means price becomes the differentiator by default. So how do you close these positioning gaps? I'm going to walk you through exactly how I do this with clients, using the same PDCA framework from engineering that I apply to all the brands I work on. PDCA stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act. In planning, before we change anything, we get the specification clear. What makes your work actually different? Not, I really care about my clients different, but specifically mechanically different in a way that produces a different outcome. For most service providers, the real differentiation lives in their process, in their background, or their perspective. It's usually there. It just hasn't been surfaced and made into brand language yet. In my case, I apply engineering principles to brand strategy. That's not me saying I'm thorough and strategic. It's a specific process distinction that changes how I work and what it produces. Once I named that clearly, the pricing conversation changed completely. Here's the part of this that most brand advice skips, and it's the thing that actually determines whether any of the rest of this works. The second step is to do. Build your positioning around the transformation, not the service. Once we actually know what's different about your work, we build the brand language around that transformation that it creates. Again, we're not just telling them the service you deliver. Practically, this means rewriting the positioning statement, the headline, and the first impression of your brand to answer 3 questions in this order. Who is this for, specifically? What changes for them, specifically? And why you, specifically? Every word of your brand positioning gets built to answer those 3 questions for the exact person you most want to work with. It's not for everyone, it's for the right one. The third step is check. This is the 30-second test. And this is how you know the positioning is working. Show your updated brand language, your headline, your positioning, your about section to someone who doesn't know you. Give them 30 seconds and then ask them, who is this for? What's this do for that person, and why is this person different from the alternatives? If they can answer all 3 of those clearly, your positioning is doing its job. If they can't, something's still a little too vague. We go back and sharpen it. That is not creative intuition. This is measurement and testing. It's the step that most brand revisions skip entirely, which is why they have to redo them 6 months later. The last step of this is to act. You make one targeted change, not a full rebrand. And here's what I tell every client who comes to me after losing work on price. You almost certainly don't need a full rebrand. You need a positioning clarification. One clear headline that names the transformation. One who it's for statement that makes the right person feel seen, and a case example that shows what done looks like. That's it. 3 specific targeted changes built to the right specification will do more for your positioning than a new logo, a new website, and a new color palette combined. When your positioning closes those 3 gaps, when a prospect can immediately understand who you help, what changes, and why you, your sales conversation goes much, much smoother. Those prospects come in already understanding your value. You're not starting from scratch trying to build the case for why you're worth your rate. They read your brand and they get it. The conversation moves from convince me to, okay, show me how this works. And here's the thing about that shift. It doesn't just change the close rate, it changes who closes. The prospects who were going with cheaper alternatives because your value wasn't clear, they'll self-select out earlier, before the sales conversation even happens. The ones who get it and value it will go further in. So you end up with fewer wrong conversations, more of the right ones, and that's what clear positioning produces. If you've been losing work to cheaper alternatives and it's frustrating, I want you to consider that the problem might not be your price at all. It's probably your positioning. And positioning is fixable. Not through a gut feel rebrand, but through a systematic process of diagnosing what's actually happening and making targeted specific changes to close the gap.